So you want to own a mountain, not visit it, not rent a condo near the base of it, not buy a weak timeshare, actually own the thing outright. The lodge with your name over the door, the lift you can ride whenever you feel like it, the little kingdom of snow that everyone else has to pay to enter. You picture the groomers going out at 4 a.m. under headlights, the fire pit at the base, the season pass line wrapped around your building every November, like it's opening night for a movie. You picture yourself as the person who decides which trails get named after which family members. A single-day pass at a place like Deer Valley now runs past $300, and some resorts have quietly crossed $400 on their absolute peak dates. Over the holidays, no discount. Cash only if the machine's down. That's the number that makes owning one feel provable. Feel like there's obviously a fortune sitting in that base area. Here's the problem. The mountain was never the business. What you're actually buying when you buy a ski resort is one of four very different things wearing the exact same marketing photo of a groomed run at sunrise. There's the destination mega resort, think Vail, Aspen, Whistler, which is really a real estate and hospitality company that happens to have chairlifts bolted to the side of it. There's the regional day trip mountain, the kind 2 hours outside a major city, which survives entirely on season pass volume and Saturday traffic. There's the tiny community hill, often non-profit or town-owned, kept alive by youth ski programs and local goodwill more than any real profit motive. And there's the private members mountain, which isn't really a business at all. It's a very expensive hobby with a gate and an initiation fee. The one we're actually talking about here is the second kind, the regional workhorse, because that's where almost all the real financial violence in this industry happens. The destination resorts have real estate empires to fall back on when a season goes sideways. The regional mountains only have snow, debt, and a pass card to fall back on, and that's a much thinner cushion than it sounds like from the outside. Getting in costs more than people expect, and the sticker price on the mountain itself is honestly the easy part. A single high-speed detachable chairlift, the modern kind with a bubble over the seat, the one that makes the ride feel expensive even when the ticket wasn't, runs $8 to $12 million installed, and a mid-size mountain needs several of them just to move people at a reasonable pace on a busy Saturday. Snowmaking is worse, and this is where the real number actually lives. A serious snowmaking system, the guns, the underground pipe network, the pump house, the reservoir that has to hold millions of gallons on standby through the fall. That's routinely $15 to $25 million for a mountain of real size, and it's not optional anymore. It's the whole business now, because natural snow has quietly become a bonus, not a plan. Peak Resorts, a chain of 17 small and mid-sized mountains stretched across the Midwest and Northeast, sold itself to Vail Resorts in 2019 for roughly $264 million, debt included. Sit with that for a second. $264 million for 17 entire mountains, lifts and lodges and land and all. That number will come back around later, and when it does, it'll mean something different than it does sitting here right now. Here's the part nobody explains before you sign anything, and it's the part that actually determines whether you survive year one. When you buy an existing resort, you don't just buy the lifts and the land underneath them. You inherit the union contracts with the ski patrol, some of which were negotiated decades before you showed up and simply can't be renegotiated, because you'd personally prefer different terms. You inherit water rights agreements for snowmaking that in a dry state can genuinely be worth more on paper than the mountain itself, because without that specific water allocation, the snow guns are just expensive scarecrows pointed at a slope. You inherit the deferred maintenance on lifts installed under Reagan that some previous owner kept patching instead of replacing, because replacing them meant admitting the number already on the books was wrong. And then, this is the one that actually kills people financially. You inherit the resort's existing season pass liabilities. If the previous owner sold 5,000 season passes last spring, redeemable at your mountain for the winter that's coming, you now owe every single one of those visits, whether or not it snows a single flake, the week the new owner takes possession. You bought a debt of unfulfilled ski days before you ever set foot on the chairlift you now technically own. So how does a mountain actually make money once you're past the trap you just inherited and the ink is already dry. Layer 1 is the lift ticket, and this is the one everybody assumes is the entire business, the whole reason the operation exists in the first place. It isn't, not anymore. On a well-run mountain, day tickets and multi-day tickets might account for only 25 to 35% of total revenue, because most serious skiers stopped buying day tickets years ago. They're buying passes instead, the same way almost nobody buys a single album anymore. Layer 2, and this is genuinely the one that runs the industry now, whether you like the model or not, is the season pass itself, sold in April, for the following winter, at a steep discount, months before anyone on Earth knows what that winter's snow will actually look like. An Epic Pass or an Icon Pass can run $800 to $1,000, and the companies behind them sell hundreds of thousands of them before a single lift has even started spinning for the season. Layer 3 is real estate. Slopeside condos, ground leases, homeowner association fees that many resorts collect in perpetuity off land they developed exactly once, decades ago, and now just harvest forever like a toll booth nobody can legally dismantle. And Layer 4, the one almost nobody accounts for when they run the numbers on a napkin, is food, beverage, and rental gear, which carries margins that would make a Michelin restaurant genuinely jealous. A lodge burger that costs the resort maybe $4 to produce sells for $18. No apology attached to the price tag. And here's the number that actually stopped me when I first ran it. A single pair of rental skis, bought once, gets rented back out roughly 200 times over its useful life before it's finally retired. 200 separate transactions, off one pair of skis that was paid for exactly once. There is no other retail category on that mountain that turns over like that. None of these 4 layers is safe standing entirely on its own. Together, stacked on top of each other, they're the only reason this business survives at all. Now, the costs that eat all 4 of those layers alive, one at a time, starting with the one that never actually stops. Snowmaking isn't a one-time expense. It's a running war against the actual temperature outside. Pumping water and compressed air through hundreds of individual guns costs a mid-size resort somewhere between $1 and $3 million in electricity alone, in a single season, and that's before you count the diesel for the groomers dragging the same runs flat over and over, all night. Every single night the mountain's open for business. Insurance is worse than most people expect walking in the door. Liability coverage for a resort with a chairlift, a terrain park full of jumps, and thousands of strangers strapped to skis and snowboards can run into the hundreds of thousands annually. And one serious lift incident, the kind that makes the local news that evening, can spike that premium overnight with zero room to negotiate. Labor is seasonal and genuinely brutal to staff correctly. You need to hire, train, and often house hundreds of workers for roughly 4 months a year, get them all fully competent right as the season peaks, and then let almost all of them go, every single spring, and start completely over again every single fall, forever, with no end date ever attached to that cycle. It's a strange business where you rebuild your entire workforce annually and call that normal. But here's the actual mechanism that makes this business fragile, more than any single cost line item could on its own. The modern pass system, Epic, Icon, the regional knockoff versions of the same idea, means resorts collect the bulk of an entire season's cash in April and May for a winter that hasn't happened yet, and that nobody can honestly forecast with any real confidence that far out. That money gets spent immediately on the snowmaking upgrades, the lift maintenance, the payroll deposits, all of it fully committed before opening day even arrives on the calendar, which means a bad snow year doesn't just cost the resort some ticket revenue on the margin. The ticket revenue was never actually the safety net everyone assumes it is from the outside. The real number that determines whether a mountain survives a bad winter isn't total pass sales from last spring, and it isn't opening day snow depth either, however good that photo looks. It's late season walk-up traffic, the unpredictable days in February and March when a warm winter has already burned through the pre-sold cash, and the mountain needs fresh money from people showing up that specific morning to cover a payroll that was budgeted for a completely normal season. A resort can look completely full on paper. Passes sold out, condos booked, the parking lot photographed for the website in December, and still be one warm February away from a genuine cash crisis because the money that actually keeps the lights on in March was never the money that came in back in April. That should stop you for a second, honestly. The healthiest looking balance sheet in this entire industry can be sitting directly on top of a February that just refuses to get cold. Which brings us back to the 17 mountains and the $264 million. Peak Resorts ran regional hills across Missouri, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, and a handful of other states for decades on genuinely thin margins, doing exactly what a regional operator has to do to survive, squeezing every layer of revenue it could find, running snowmaking as hard as the budget realistically allowed, competing directly against destination mountains that had entire real estate empires to fall back on whenever a season went sideways on them. Then, Vail Resorts and a rival company called Alterra started fighting an outright pass war against each other, each one building a network of dozens of mountains under a single card, and independent operators like Peak found themselves squeezed from both directions at once, priced out of the marketing budgets needed to compete for pass sales in the first place, and simultaneously the single most attractive acquisition target in the entire industry, precisely because their thin margins and existing debt made them cheap to absorb quickly. In 2019, Vail Resorts bought Peak Resorts for that same $264 million, folding all 17 mountains straight into the Epic Pass network in one single announcement. The mountains themselves didn't physically change overnight. The lifts kept running the very next morning. The same staff kept showing up in the same uniforms they'd worn the week before. What changed was who owned the pass those skiers were actually using to get on the lift, and it turns out that was the only ownership in the entire chain that ever actually mattered. Because here's who actually wins this whole industry, and it genuinely isn't the person who owns the mountain. It's the company that owns the pass network the mountain plugs into. Full stop. No exceptions. Vail Resorts and Alterra don't primarily make their money from skiing itself. They make money the way a streaming service makes money, by selling a subscription months in advance, banking that cash immediately, and then actively managing the real cost of service, snowmaking, lift operations, seasonal staffing, across dozens of properties at once, so that a genuinely bad year in Missouri gets quietly absorbed by a great year happening simultaneously in Utah. A single independent mountain has no realistic way to hedge against one bad winter on its own. A pass network with 40 mountains spread across 3 time zones effectively self-insures against weather, because it's statistically improbable for all 40 of them to have a bad year at exactly the same time. The man who actually built this specific model is Rob Katz, who took over as Vail Resorts CEO in 2006, and in 2008, restructured the entire company around one specific decision: sell passes absurdly cheap, months ahead of the season, to lock in cash flow and skier loyalty before winter has even started, then make the real money afterward, on volume, on real estate, and on food and beverage, once people are already fully committed and showing up regardless of what the forecast actually said that week. Every mountain acquired into that network, since including all 17 of Peak's hills, wasn't being bought for its terrain, or its vertical drop, or its historical snow record. It was being bought purely for its position on a map that Katz had already finished drawing years before that particular deal ever closed. So what does an honest year actually look like, on the ground, if you're the one running one of these mountains yourself? In a good year, with a genuinely cold December and consistent natural snow holding all the way through March, a mid-size regional resort might clear 20 to 30% operating margins. Pass revenue already banked back in spring, walk-up traffic strong on the weekends, real estate fees rolling in exactly on schedule like clockwork every quarter. In a bad year, a warm winter, a late opening, walk-up traffic that never shows up because there's no natural snow left anywhere to even photograph for social media. That same resort can post an operating loss in the high 6 figures, even with every single pass already sold months earlier, because that pass money was already spent building the infrastructure to serve a normal season, not this particular one. What actually determines which of those two very different years an owner ends up living through isn't skill, and it isn't even the resort's own snowmaking budget, however large that budget happens to be. It's the Pacific jet stream sitting roughly 3,000 miles away in a given February, and no amount of good management on the ground changes where that jet stream decides to park itself that particular winter. The honest uncertainty at the center of this entire business isn't the math. The math is knowable, spreadsheet by spreadsheet, line by line. It's the weather, and nobody in this industry has actually cracked that one yet, no matter how confidently they'll tell you otherwise on an earnings call. A ski resort isn't a mountain with a business quietly attached to it. It's a subscription company that happens to require snow as a manufacturing input, the same basic way a brewery needs water or an airline needs jet fuel just to function day to day. You don't buy the peak, whatever the deed technically says about it. You buy exposure to a jet stream, a debt repayment schedule, and a pass network that decides, months before winter even starts, whether your entire year was already won or lost before you opened a single lift. The lift line was never the product being sold. The mountain was just where they filmed it.